Welcome to our podcast, Stepping into Shakespeare, a podcast journey with the Bard. In this podcast, we are talking about how we approach the play Hamlet as actors, what we learn along the way, and we share our experiences. I am Therese, a Swiss actress based in the UK.
And I'm Lynn Dawson, a British actress based in LA. The purpose of this podcast is to document our rehearsal process with reading Hamlet.
Today we are talking about the characters of Claudius, Horatio, and Rosencrantz. Our guest is Andy Davoli, a very talented American actor who has a great career in both film and television.
Some of his best-known projects include The Odds, Welcome to Collinwood, and The Sopranos.
Welcome, Andy, to our podcast.
So how did you first get interested in Shakespeare?
I was on a movie back in, 2003, 2004. It was called Warm Springs. It was an HBO film about Franklin Roosevelt. And I was blessed to be cast in that film. It's about how he had gotten polio and was like this kind of arrogant politician and was humbled through this experience for years and went down to these hot springs in Georgia to rehabilitate. And so he was able to connect with the regular people that made him, more of the man that he ended up becoming. And he was played by Kenneth Branagh.
Do you work with Kenneth Branagh?
Yeah, which at that point I hadn't done any Shakespeare. I had seen Looking for Richard, and I studied it in high school and all that stuff and college, but I just was still gun shy. This concept of an American actor doing Shakespeare, you have to do an accent, blah blah blah. And then after that experience, I was like, maybe this is a bit of a God shot here. Let me jump into a class. And I was training at, one of the apprentices of Stella Adler out here in LA. And he had a great Shakespeare, 6-week foundation where you learn a sonnet. And you learn the sonnet in your own words first. And then we did things like mask work and put mats down on the ground. And we're doing all kinds of animal work and just found a great joy and comfort in playing with that. And then I was like, wait a second. So it's like, I'm joking, but it sounds a little bit like Yoda speak. Like once your ear kind of tunes into it, it kind of makes sense. And it's just much more eloquent and a higher level of thought. And so that's kind of how it began. And then I ended up doing 12th Night in Balboa Park where I played Festi. And I think we made a real muck of it, but it was still a great experience, And that's how
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so you were reading Claudius.
Yes.
Which is the uncle of Hamlet, and he stole the title and the wife and everything. So how did you experience reading him, and how did you prepare for it?
I had a good conversation with Frank about it. He was focusing on the fact that you're a king. And I was like, why does he keep talking about being a king? Because the guy just, he stole it. But there is kind of I started looking up how, kings posture themselves or royalty, the way they hold their hands behind. And if your family, in your family that you're born into this kind of upper echelon thing. So that was one approach, although we were seated when we're doing this. But then I wanted where does the king live in me? Because it's then it can be I have to be a king. I have to go out here. And the other thing is the way that obviously very conniving and manipulative, but he has these moments of half repentance, let's say, because he doesn't want to give up the crown or his wife, but he has this conscience that he is praying and doing his act of contrition, so to speak, with God. But I found that interesting. And then the tale as old as time. I mean, the Cain and Abel aspect, the primal eldest curse of killing one's brother. So there's a bit of scar in there, from the Lion King. And so I just let those things try to seep into my unconscious. The words are so heightened, as we know, and so they do so much work for us. Get out of the way and then play.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because I think with Claudius, he kind of makes an effort to repent, but then he's but I'm not going to give anything up. So it's just a half. That's
that narcissism thing. You know what I mean? It's almost does he feel guilty because he's feeling bad for himself, but not what he did to anybody else. I mean, obviously true apology or, reconciliation is to come back and own up to everything. And so he wants his cake and eat it too, I mean, what an interesting villain, right? I mean, it's the fact that he does have that moment where he tries to apologize or pray.
Yeah. Well, I think Shakespeare's characters, they're not black and white, you know, they're so layered. You can't say like he's totally bad. Like he has good moments like everybody. And I think even Hamlet has moments where he's like completely not exactly the hero. He's like the anti-hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's
more complex to dive in. Sure.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that's what's great about Shakespeare is you don't get like black and white like you do in Hollywood, you know, it's like very deep characters.
I kept thinking too, is like, was he thinking for years about, maybe
exactly
for Gertrude, maybe he was in love with her like in high school or, in a younger thing. And then his brother married her. And like, how these seeds can be planted in someone. And if they're not taken care of, they, it becomes a whole like agenda that finally, so it was obviously the title. And that was another thing, right? Unless you're the firstborn, you would not be the king, right? So, so it's amazing what human ambition, right, can do. Thing once that one of the great things about Shakespeare is like, we know like if you're like dirt poor and broke, like, yes, these are real struggles too. But the fact that also you could be the wealthiest in the world and still be struggling and have these things is why Shakespeare wanted to tackle so much of like royalty in that, level of social like place.
Yeah, it's true. I think like, honestly, everybody has problems. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's exactly it. No amount of money in the world or status, it's still Thursday. We got to like do what we got to do,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really true. But I think also Shakespeare has a lot about power in his plays. Everybody is like thirsting for power. They want to kill everybody. So it's like
things they'll do to do it, to get it,
Yeah. We actually don't know a lot about the relationship before Claudius and the father of Hamlet. We don't know if they had a good childhood, if they had like long-lasting conflicts or anything.
Right. I mean, it makes me think of my own siblings and stuff like that. And you can see how those threads can start early on. And if not handled properly, they could turn to, to something not good.
Turn into Hamlet.
Exactly.
The play is really interesting. The whole thing is just a lot of stuff happening.
It's so fun to revisit these things too. I mean, in different age and more experience in life, and you see things. I definitely see things differently.
When you were reading Claudius, was there like a line which made an impression on you, or do you remember? Yeah.
Yeah, the line, when sorrows come, they come not single spies, but in battalions. And the reason is I didn't remember that was Claudius's line. I had used that in referencing troubled times in my life. And so I was like, wow, it's from Hamlet and that's Claudius. And Frank asked me to read Claudius. So I just always love that because it's kind of like, it's such a poetic line, but how sometimes when things are going wrong, or it could feel like Murphy's Law, like everything's all at once.
Yeah.
What a divine way to say it,
Yeah.
And so that one really stuck out.
That's so funny because you said that about your line with Claudius. And then Therese also read a line that she had in her head when she read Marcellus. So it's interesting how this play has like, people recognize stuff from their own life.
Yeah,
amazing. Exactly. Like it's just meant to be in a way, you use something and it's like the more Shakespeare we can memorize and learn. I mean, I told him I was doing an interview, but he's
that's fine. Sweet.
He wants what he wants.
Are they learning Shakespeare already?
Exactly.
I think they've popped up in a few readings, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But do you have like, because when we talk to Manuel, he has like this monologue from Henry V that is like his like thing. And I have a couple of monologues that I love from Twelfth Night. Do you have like a monologue or anything from Shakespeare that is in your head?
I have the sonnet that I worked on, and I still have that. I was able to do it in the Greek theater in Sicily. And my friend was just using an iPhone, you know what I mean? But because this theater is like 5,000 years old, created before Christ type of, and it just, it just gives you that like timeless epic feel. So we did that there, and that's one that I rattle off. I started to work on the Richard III. Now is the winter of our discontent. I worked on Hamlet's monologues before, but it inspires me to kind of like start having them in the canon, because it's like I obviously love modern stuff, but something this group of us, getting together, doing this, it's been so inspiring to just have such elevated language, because so much of life is just like in the mud, So it's like when you have to reach and say something so just so eloquent, it's inspiring.
Yeah. And how did you feel saying this old English and this eloquent language? Was it a struggle for you, or did it come easily?
It was before the class, and then once I took the class, it clicked. Somehow it just clicked.
Okay.
I mean, there may be words here and there. Of course, I could look up and what did he mean by that? But your mind the mind kind of like adapts to how it's being said.
It does. It's just like its own kind of language, so you get in the flow of it and you can really just kind of go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with Emmanuel, we were talking about how it's all about the rhythm you have to find. And if you fall out, it's kind of hard to understand what you actually say.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. And then when you click in, you're like, wait, I'm flowing now. Feel the words, taking me on a journey.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think Shakespeare really, he knows what he's doing. His writing is so brilliant. It takes you up and then down and then up. And it's like just such a journey. So as long as you're in the rhythm of it, then you know where you are in the play. So you're not like lost at what's going on, which is great. Because I think it can be super intimidating for people when they first start, because it's just all of this stuff,
Yeah, there's baggage around what you think about it, especially depending on what culture you're raised in. But that's why I credit Al doing Looking for Richard. I remember seeing that in the Angelica Theater in New York City, like pre 9/11, and just going on the street, interviewing people and talking to people and going to students. And there was just this like joyful exuberance about, his love of doing this language. And I'm Italian American too. So like, it was just kind of inspiring to see that from New York, So that was like, I think where the seed was planted, like, oh, this could actually be fun to do. Not just like this, I have to do this in school and I'm learning this thing because it's to get a grade, It
is fun. And I was talking to Barry recently, Barry Navidi, and he was saying like Al is working on the monologue Mark Antony from Julius Caesar, even now, right? And I'm like, he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to sit there and work on Mark Antony.
It nourishes him in a way, like, always working on something. And as you're saying, like, with other monologues and things and parts. Whether you're on a show or a movie or a play or not, like being an actor is like, it's a lifetime process, a lifetime journey. And there's canons of great literature and plays for us to dive into.
Yeah, definitely. Which is really cool.
I remember seeing Brando do that in a movie, like in my 20s. I was like, wow, like that was like, so.
What did he do?
He did Mark Antony.
Oh, really?
He plays Mark Antony in the movie and he just comes on. It's breathtaking. Just YouTube the monologue, the Mark Antony monologue when Mr. Caesar is murdered. It's like fire, He goes in.
Wow, I'm going to see that. What year was that then? That must have been like 19.
He was young. He was young. He must have been in his 20s.
Wow. Yeah. And it's on YouTube. I'll look it up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a treat.
Yeah. And then you were also reading Horatio. And Horatio is the only person who survives this whole bloodbath at the end of Hamlet.
That's amazing.
How did you feel reading him?
Horatio to me is much more like, it's like the best friend, the loyal friend that has genuine concern and is going on this journey. And so, I'd like to say I'm that's more the kind of person I am. So but there still is this thing of, being friends with the prince, and being in that kind of that rhythm of, body language and speech and how that would be if your best friend was the prince. And then just to personalize it, then he just lost his dad. And then this like specter shows up. I mean, how terrifying how terrifying would that be? Like, I know.
Yeah, totally.
I don't believe you guys. You guys are crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you using Ouija boards, and bet you the temperature would change. And that's eerie. And the fact that Shakespeare uses that device to kind of key us into what's going on. A little bit of Ebenezer Scrooge moment there. So
that is cool.
Yeah, it's just fun to like kind of also be like, playing the villain over here. And then here's a guy, who's loyal to the end. And what he really thinks, like because he said, don't go to the ghost. It might convince you to commit suicide or this might not be the best idea. And that's a good friend,
Yeah, it's like a conscience. His conscience.
That's right. Absolutely. I'm Geppetto.
But it's kind of traumatic for Horatio at the end, though. I mean, he's just like
That's what I thought. Like everyone is dead and he's standing there. I mean, he must feel like, yeah.
Man, they got to do a sequel, where he's just like in therapy the rest of his life.
Yeah, exactly. Trauma. He had a big trauma.
Definitely, for sure.
And how did you imagine his character? Like young,
but noble and loyal. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, which are like the flip side of the coin, they're the same, but they're not loyal. And not at parts, I don't think,
Yeah.
But I always remember that Tom Stoppard play or movie that, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Did you ever see that?
Mm-mm.
I haven't seen it in years. I remember seeing it like back in the New York days. That's a good play. Gary Oldman, I think he plays Rosencrantz. I always loved characters because they're just the names themselves they're like these goofballs that get in the mix, but they're not loyal. They're willing to be sycophants to, the king and so they can get what they need and throw their friend under the bus.
I'm sure there's a lot of people like that. I mean, honestly.
That's right. Yeah.
Shakespeare knows human nature, doesn't he? So
very well, I think.
I think of them as having kind of a bit of a slower wit, so it's kind of like.
I saw that. I saw you did that because I cleaned it up with the edit and I could see that you did that with the character.
Yeah, that was instinctual, just thinking like, how do you, you're bouncing around, and that was my intuition on that, You ever see like somebody that, I don't know, it's like counting slower, just having your thoughts, like try to understand, regurgitate things more. But I do think they're very similar though. Those two characters, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I don't know how you would
Yeah, they are pretty similar. In fact, I think you read both of them at one point. So
yeah, right, exactly. When one of our guys dropped out there.
It is tricky when you've got to read more than one character because you want to bring something to it, but then you don't want to go overboard. So it's like,
that's what I mean, exactly. And to have more time with the director and explore things or talk about things, I've heard it done with like a very Cockney accent, which kind of makes sense, if you're, but I'm from upstate New York. So I'm like, I don't want to like distract from my version of that unless I have it mastered,
But I think it lends itself to like a lot of different accents. Shakespeare is not, it shouldn't just be like RP, you can do it with any accent. I think it sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that was the big thing where you can approach it with, with your own voice. Obviously reach up for it, but don't just think you have to do it like, proper this way only. That's the only way they can be done.
Yeah. And I think that's what Therese is a little concerned about, weren't you? You were worried that people would think, you have an accent and people can't understand you.
Yeah. At the beginning, I had kind of this language barrier, but then, no.
It's just not true because like your accent, in effect, is closer to Denmark than.
That's
interesting. That's true.
Yeah.
Your unique soul, both of you, your imprints on it. That's what we're drawn into.
Exactly.
Human to human, whether we're in an audience or as an actor too,
Yeah.
If we push it away, then we're kind of like, we're almost hiding in a sense. And it's much more vulnerable that way.
And I mean, I learned so much just reading with you guys. For me, it was fantastic. And as I said before to Sarah, I always thought like when we come on, it's only Zoom. We never met in a real room, but already this little magic can happen. One starts reading and the other person can click into this atmosphere. And I find that helped me a lot to hear as well how you read, how Frank is reading. I think this is amazing. This is like the acting world.
Right? I love that because like on the repeats on a play, like what's going to make it different is what we're giving to each other on that day. I mean, the lines, thing,
Yeah, definitely. And I think Zoom it's quite good for Shakespeare because it's a lot of words. So, I mean, I know they do it on stage and I know there's action, but it's really good for audio. Like
that's true.
Do you know what I mean? Like he has all of the exposition and all of the character building and everything is in the words. So it's, you don't need too much visual.
So it helps. The words are the vision. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I think that's all our questions, right?
Yeah, I think we are at the end of our questions. So
thank you so much. This was really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's like, it's a real treat to have been invited to this group. And honestly, like sometimes like you're going through life, you're doing things, going in for this or that, or, just living regular life. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, we're reading Hamlet, start getting into what it is that we love to do. Especially these past 2.5 years have been, and we've gotten to do like, I don't know how many plays we've done, but 11 plays. There you go.
Well, I think you did less, but Frank and I have started. We did 11. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think it must be like 7 or 8. Besides when I'm, we've done
Which
quite
is
a
a
lot.
lot.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah. To be able to find a way to do what we do and pick up a play, read it, research it, work on it, and then just dive in.
Yeah, it's good therapy.
That's very true.
Wow.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
In our next episode, we talk about the characters of Polonius and Guildenstern, played by Emanuel Todorov.